corn, as you know, is a vegetable that was imported from the Caribbean up here. It was originally discovered in Haiti, I think. But corn, being a tropical plant like that, we have to plant seed in the spring, and then of course they grow amazingly fast. And by July, August, it's 6 or 7 feet tall, or maybe 8 feet tall. But it grows so fast, and the cells of the corn expand at and multiply at such a great rate, and it pushes up from the center. It's like as a swirl, and it pushes up through there as it slips through the sections that are already completed. The new section will make a squeaking sound, and you can actually hear that in the field because it's planted at 30,000 population, which is 30,000 plants per acre. And an acre is 44,000 square feet. So you'll have, you know, almost a 1 plant to the square foot. And it's remarkable. It's remarkable that you'd hear something grow. And it's growing as it's pushing up and expanding upwards. It's, you know, each plant is growing at a different rate, at a different stage, you know. So you could almost maybe put a tune together, but it'll be a solid amount of squeaking going on all the time, like a swing might make a squeaking sound like that. But that's what happens in the cornfield. That's bamboo that's growing there.
You got a boat too?
Yep.
Yeah, I used to.
I haven't had it out very much this year.
Yeah.
Because we were expecting a plumber.
You leave it.
Yeah.
Sign for it yourself if you have to.
Yeah, right. I built that this summer. I had two. Something happened. See, this is the potato. Well, I had the newspaper come out and took pictures of it. I had the U.S. Department of Agriculture guy here. I said, what's going on? Could they actually cross? And he said, no, it can't be. What he said, this is a throwback to the original potatoes.
Okay.
Had fruit on them.
Yeah.
And we domesticated the potato and started...
used the root. Yeah.
Yes. But he said the original, it produced a fruit.
Huh.
But anyway, we've got a lot of tomatoes off this thing this year, and I hope it's making potatoes inside. Probably is.
Yeah.
But it's kind of unique. I took a red potato and split it in quarters.
Uh-huh.
Put a quarter of a potato in the top of each bucket.
Huh.
And it grew up, and they're making potatoes, all right. But I never suspected it would make some fruit. But it's remarkable anyway. There's not too many you're going to see around like that.
Right.
Did Johnny ever talk to you about the biharmonics machine?
Yeah, I worked a lot with them.
Yeah.
I have about 15 of them downstairs.
Yeah.
Biharmonics. And I worked a lot with biharmonics with him.
Yeah.
He was always interested in cycles. And cycles, as you know, can be represented on an oscilloscope. And that is, when you see the frequency form on an oscilloscope, is a true representation of a cycle. And likewise, the planets, the environment, the Earth itself runs in different cycles, like the pulse, like the beating of a heart. And he was very interested in that, as everything could be identified by frequency. And therefore it had a certain cycle to it. And We got involved in a weather company, weather forecasting company called Weather Science Foundation, which is an old company. And they were in the process, or were in the business of forecasting weather for private weather forecasts for companies. And they employed quite a few men at one time, several hundred people. It was in Glenview, Illinois.
Oh, Illinois, okay.
And Dr. Raymond Wheeler from the University of Kansas was probably the basis of that, because he had studied tree ring cycles for years and years, and was able to prove by the science of reading tree rings the different lengths of cycles that were repeating, you know. And then he was also a co-worker with Dr. Selby Maxwell, who was an astronomer. And of course, Maxwell's theories were that since the Earth turns, the moon turns, sun turns, everything in the universe turns. So they all have a cycle. And he was able to prove by the influence of the gravitational pull from the different astronomical bodies, like the moon, the different planets, the sun, very, very even distant stars. They change by their action of their gravity, change the surface of the Earth, the atmospheric surface. And he was able to match those cycles with Dr. Wheeler's cycles. And Wheeler, of course, developed his out of entirely different science and independent from Maxwell. But when you put the different cycles together that each man developed, they were the same length. And so they were able to build a company based on what those cycles would do for weather, and could run it forward or backward. And what they do after casting. So what they did is they run the cycles backwards, and they'd look at the weather that actually happened in recordable history and see if those cycles matched. And they did. So they'd run them forward, and then they could tell they were forecasting about 85% accuracy. And this was in the 20s and the 30s, without computers. This is a sum of 220,000 plus 1,100,000 plus 5,600,000 years. See, and this is weather and changes on the Earth. See, and if you talk about atmosphere, quite a bit. But and there was a number of these scrolls that disappeared. This is that scroll that Dr. Maxwell wrote. This is how he wrote everything. And it was all put together. This is the original. And this is 100 feet long.
Wow.
What's it about?
Everything.
Yeah.
It's all about weather. It's all about, he always started paragraphs like this.
Alchemist, yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, it's really something to read, and it really should be studied.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be studied, because he went into all kinds of stuff. And
were he and John pretty well acquainted?
No,
No.
he never knew him. John,
Because John
he
knew
passed away before
John knew a lot about alchemy.
Yeah, yes. And Dr. Maxwell had his own observatory built in Chicago.
Yeah.
He had a lot of formulas, and he talked about the Earth's mantle, and he studied everything.
And where did this come from? I mean,
This is Dr. Selby Maxwell. He was part of the original Weather Science Foundation,
Okay.
which we purchased as a family. We bought that company,
Right.
and then we renamed it Cyclomatic Engineering. He talks about time and
Yeah, I saw that.
everything in there.
So a lot of the orientation is towards the weather, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. He believed it, and he was right about the weather, the atmosphere of the Earth being perturbed by the gravitational pull of the planets,
Right.
and not just the moon and the sun, but all of the planets. You have them up as a total effect upon the atmosphere. So. That company had grown very old. I mean, the people that worked there were old people, and the science of forecasting and everything was changing. They had tied it into markets, the way markets moved, based on the cycles. And so that's how Johnny got interested, because he lived in Chicago, and he got to meet those people. And he became very, very interested in that. And but what we were kind of concerned about was what other things would be affecting the markets other than weather, and that would be pesticides, pests, not just the weather, but a lot of the environmental things that affect us. See? So we got involved in another company, and that became one of the things that I think Johnny devoted most of his life to, and that was a company called Cyclomatics. And Cyclomatics incorporated the use of devices that would or could control pests from remote areas. It wasn't enough to know what the weather would do.
Right.
You still have to control the other elements. So by using this equipment that was developed, and one of the base founders for this kind of process was Dr. Galen Hieronymus. And Hieronymus was able to do remotely things like killing insects at 1,000 miles away, by having a pitcher. He worked with a pitcher and, say, a leaf, and he could kill the bugs on a tree 1,000 miles away. And he did that by using some of this equipment that my brother worked with. And that equipment today is still, still something that could work, but I'm more interested in the principle behind it, about why could it work than why it did work. And and I have that. I've got all that equipment too. It was something that Johnny felt could alleviate a lot of problems that man has today. I know that Johnny was very religiously secretive about this device, and he regarded it as his priority. He safeguarded it,
Right.
and I suppose the fact that maybe that he was so involved with it, he might have been very cautious about people imitating it and stuff. In fact, I don't know why he would be that way, because a lot of stuff that he put in this machine, he adapted from other people's. He called it a bioharmonic machine, which is just another name for what it was doing. It's similar to the machines that were built in the past before he did. He improved that because of the frequency that he used. This when he converted this or built this machine, it was built on overlapping frequencies, which he controlled by the selection. I don't know how many tubes. This is a tube machine. It's not building transistors. So the fact that he very much emphasized that he had more control of the frequency of it using tubes. But he had thousands of tubes that he used till he found the exact ones that would match the frequencies that he wanted to transmit through. And so in that fact, it's kind of safeguarded by its own construction, because to imitate it would be very, very hard, But in the past, machines have been built like this for the application of medicine and chemicals for remote implementation. And I mean that by to apply it to land protection against insects, and that's where I originally heard about it. But it's been used therapeutically for people too. But the idea is to connect the machine with the person or with the plot of ground. And he always used, say, a soil sample. If he wanted to treat ground against pests, he'd use a soil sample and a photograph and tie those two together onto a plate. This a plate like this, which was connected through here, and this was run to a ground. And this plate being disinfected and cleaned before anything's put on here, and you put a photograph, say, and he liked to use Polaroid because the negative was included, and a soil sample, which he called a key. And then, of course, that was attached through here, and the ground was to a ground. Actually, a good permanent ground wire with a 6-foot rod in the ground. And then this was turned off. This was an antenna, similar. And you could actually, if you had a soil sample from a piece of ground in India, you could treat that here by using this, and you'd power on, run about 15 minutes to warm the circuits and the tubes up, and then you turn this on, and that would, he says spray, because he was licensed under the Department of Agriculture, and so that's why he has that spray. But that's what he was treating the ground through the matrix of the connectivity of the earth. So if you're treating a piece of ground in India, it wouldn't make any difference if it was next door or if it was in India. So it would travel through the matrix system through that. Now, as you can see in there, it's just tubes and a transformer, but they're all tuned so that they put out a specific wavelength, and the key travels within that frequency, which he found to be capable of transmitting that information into the matrix. And the whole idea was to keep this completely clean of any other frequency except the key that you wanted to transmit to.
So you disinfect that first,
Yeah.
and then put your...
Yeah, he always used rubber gloves and everything with this. So
Right.
he had no vibrations of his self onto anything, see. So, But the whole idea was you could remotely treat things and this was primarily for agriculture. But it could be used for a number of things, but that's all he directly intended to use it for. And I've got a number of witnesses and pictures and photographs and stuff of what actually happened to areas that he treated. And I could say it worked, because it definitely did work. But he had, I think, a couple dozen farmers that he used in Nebraska and Iowa that used these machines, and they leased them from him on a leasing contract, and they treated thousands of acres with it. As far as I knew, I was never told that there was any problem with it. It seemed to work, but he only promoted it so far. I mean, there's a limit to how much you can actually push this kind of device, you know. And that you raise a bunch of eyebrows, you're going to be in trouble. So, U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Federal Communication System representatives, they all contacted him and met with him. And it was licensed and approved through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So,
What kind of years would that have been?
this was, I would say, in the 70s, probably 71 or 2 through probably the first part of the 80s, 81 or 2, about 10 years, I suppose. It was just one, it was a device that he was very interested in. He knew it had other ramifications, as far as a way to use it to maybe generate income or help people and stuff. He just wanted to do that. He finally ran out of interest in it. I think that's why it kind of died, and it was not really promoted after that. But
So basically, this is an iteration or a development of the Hieronymus work. Yeah.
yeah, he and I did travel down to see Galen Hieronymus and spent some time with him in Georgia. And I know Johnny had further contacts with him later, but I was there on his initial trip and met Dr. Hieronymus. And as far as the machine, I think the basis of the way he built it was a lot like the original Hieronymus machines. And but he wanted to do, and the way to actually work within the law was to get it certified through the Department of Agriculture, and it was. And so it was completely legitimate and was used for several years, but not to the extent that commercialization of the big company, because chemical companies would not have gone along with this. But I think he just wanted to stay that way. He didn't want to get too big enough to ruffle any feathers. So, but generally, I don't know what to tell you about the machine. That seemed to work. I got to know some of the farmers that used them, and through Johnny, and but I had nothing to do with the business end of it. We talked about some of the results, and I just didn't get into it with him. So.
About how many of these machines did he build?
Well, as far as I knew, there were 24 of them built.
Yeah.
At the time, and I don't have all of them back. There's probably, I've got some in storage, and I've got 4 or 5 here at the house.
Yeah.
And parts for different parts of them.
Yeah.
And I've got a collection of tubes that would work in these machines, which he had painstakingly went through with an oscilloscope to find the right ones. So I have those too. So I could rebuild them, but I had really not any interest in doing that. But they work. As far as I know, they still work. So.
And it's regular 110 volts. You just plug and play.
Plug it in, and like I said, you want to turn it on, let it warm up for about 15 minutes, and then you can turn on the transmitter.
How long do you have to transmit for?
Oh, I think he said, and I found out too, about half an hour, about 30 minutes minimum. I don't know what that reason for that was, but he felt that it would take at least that long. So.
Does the mental state of the operator get involved? Does the operator have to be concentrating on the particular field that he's, or is
No.
it's irrelevant? Once you
No.
put the witness in there, it's
That's right.
the key in
It
there.
was built to be that way, so you would
Okay.
not be personally involved with it. So, it's not like some of the other machines prior to that that were built where the operator had to be personally connected to it. You didn't have any physical connection with the machine. Once it started, you laid down all the stuff, it was automatic after that.
Yeah.
So, the radionic machines, the early ones, the person was connected, and I think there was a hazard to that, because if you use chemicals or whatever, a person could become contaminated.
Yeah.
And so he wanted it to be more impersonal and work more on an objective basis. So.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the machine we brought back from Iowa after we filmed Ronnie Sajeka?
Well, if I can get a shot of these machines over here, this would be the original one that John Sajeka developed, and I think in the late 70s, I think this was. And this one over here is a remake of this machine, only in a nicer chassis and everything.
So the one on the left is the one that Ronnie Sajeka came
yes.
to us.
And John used to lease these out for doing work in the field, and then he had a plate that went into the BIOHA
Okay.
with a picture on it. And so let's just open this up so that everybody can get a look. Anyway, let's start with a look inside so everybody can understand that it was a tube unit, and these tubes are all of the same type tubes. 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. And one rectifier tube for the power transformer. And what this machine actually does is the pitcher, when the plate is plugged into the BIOHA, and this is grounded to a water pipe or something, the pitcher resonates with this antenna right here. So it's like a loop that's going around and around and around and around. And it's never ending, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger as it builds its area in space. And so how this machine actually operates is you warm up the tube filaments and then give that about 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Make sure that the image that's on the plate then is covered up with a bell jar or something so nothing can get on it. And then you hit the spray. And that spray then starts the unit's transmitting. Now, I don't know, whether or not that I would agree with that you actually need an FCC license for this, because it's not interfering in any radio bands or anything. So let's get started and understand the principle of it. So the first amplifier, if we look at it an integrated circuit wise, we're going to set some gain on this amplifier. And so you would do that by putting a resistor to ground, and then you'd have feedback. And then what you do is you would set the gain between these two resistors, and you'd want to make this gain as high as you can. Say, let's just take this as an example, 100,000. Okay? So you got 100,000 gain, and then what would you take this input right here, and you run that to a plate, and then you take the output of that amplifier and run it to an antenna. So that when you put the image on this plate, that's in resonance with this amplifier. So what you're doing is you're creating waves, and it's sort of self-oscillating. The ideal wave would be something like this, with all the frequencies in between. All right, but that's not how this machine operates, because it's not solid state. I'm just giving an explanation here of the symbol of an amplifier.
Okay. Instantly, I take it that there's a mains going to that plate as well, right?
Well, the wire is connected, right? The wire is connected. The power supply is already on the IC here.
Oh, okay.
All right, so I'm just showing you a gain stage of 100,000.
Okay.
All right. I'm trying to make the analogy real simple for everybody to understand that it's a resonance between this plate and the antenna, and it's like a feedback. So it's like an oscillator. So what's going to happen is it's going to oscillate like this. But you want to chop these. You want to chop these to where it's oscillating like this with all the frequencies in between.
Okay.
In other words, as it oscillates, it's like a ringing oscillator. You follow me? It's like an oscillator that's ringing, where the waves are going up and down, and these are all the frequencies. And being that this plate is the witness, whatever you're putting on this plate is the witness. It's in this loop that's continually growing, like this.
Okay.
You follow me?
Yeah.
So, say, let's take what we've drawn right here, these loops, right? And let's just say this is South Africa, okay? Mm-hmm. And I get a soil sample from South Africa and a picture from South Africa, and I put that on this plate, and there's this tree that's infested. Mm-hmm. All right? Sooner or later, these waves are going to reach that point. See that?
Yeah.
And it's going to hit in that area. So, the machine.
What you put in the witness plate is a Polaroid picture?
Yeah, a Polaroid picture, which, of course, everybody knows a Polaroid's hard to get now.
Yeah.
Right? But it can be got. And basically, the Polaroid has a positive and a negative. And since this machine, the solid-state machine, wasn't like the tubes, you would have to flip this IC to be a non-inverting machine, and I'll show you why in a minute. All right, so let's suppose
just to back up a little. So the guy in South Africa would have sent you a Polaroid picture
of an infested
tree.
Right.
Yeah, and so you put it.
I would have took that picture
Put it on the witness
and
line.
the soil sample
Right.
in a part of the tree,
Right.
and then I would have put the treatment on there without touching anything and turn the machine on.
Right.
Okay, all right.
And then what this thing's going to do is start oscillating. See? It's going to form this loop. So it's like a never-ending circle that's growing and growing and growing, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it saturates the area.
So it's going to keep keep starting from a small part and going out big?
Yeah, it's going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'm going to show you why.
Right, okay.
So let's take the actual circuit. Now, I don't really want to draw the whole circuit because it would take me quite a while to do this. But I'll give you an example. We're going to start out with a plate, which is a copper plate, and say this is 5 inches by 5 inches.
Okay.
So we have a square plate, right? And this plate on this machine,
Yeah.
on these machines, is actually going into the grid of a tube. All right, and that tube, you know, has either the cathode's grounded or it goes to a resistor to ground. In this case, so Jacob put a resistor to ground, all right, which was some low value of 30 ohms. So why put it there? Anyway, it's this tube, and of course this is going to your power supply, which they call B+, and this, people that work with tubes will know exactly what I'm talking about here. And what's funny about the machine is that this one here, he used a 6AC7 tube, but he still takes this grid and he ties it to the cathode, which would be the same thing as an audio tube, a 6L6 or a 6V6, things people are familiar with that ever worked with tubes. And he ties this screen right up to the B+ level. Now, off the plate of the tube is an antenna. He calls that the antenna, and that's coupled through a low value capacitor so that you know, don't get any high voltage at the antenna. So what's actually happening here is this is making an oscillator. All right? So the thing starts to oscillate. And this gain, say, is 5,000. You know, this resistor divided by that resistor will give you the gain of the tube. All right? So 30 ohms, and then this is like 250,000 K. So of course the gain of the tube is going to be very high. So we're just going to say 5,000. And that's hardly enough to make the circuit operate the way we want it to operate, because we want it to sort of self-oscillate.
Okay.
All right? So the next stage, without the antenna, if we just disconnect the antenna and we go into the next stage of the tube, see? Now this gain is multiplied by this gain. So what we have is we have this multiplication factor in gain. And that's going to increase the oscillations. We're going to get more frequencies in the oscillations when we do this. Okay, so now we take this out to the antenna. And now we take our sample picture, which will be a tree. We're just going to call it a tree that's in the Polaroid picture. But what was unique about the Polaroid was it had a negative in it. And this machine is inverting. It's inverting the signal. In other words, what's going in here is going this direction, and what's coming out here is going that direction. So it's inverting the signal. So that's the reason for the negative.
So is that like a mirror image?
Yeah, it's a mirror image, but opposite. You know, completely opposite, 180 degrees out of phase.
Right.
And so, what is actually happening is our machine's right here. And when we start this machine into operation, these waves are generated, oscillation waves. And they keep growing like this. So now if we say our machine's in the United States, right?
Florida, yeah?
Yeah, right. We say our machine's in the United States here. It doesn't make any difference where we are in the United States. This wave's still growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. So it can reach this image with the treatment.
So presumably it'll go all around the world and come back anyway to the US.
Well, it just keeps growing.
Right.
You know, it just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing, and the tree is located over here in Africa somewhere, right? And you see the waves have already hit the tree,
Right.
with this treatment on it. So whatever you put here, right, what's going to happen is this message is going to be relayed in these oscillations that are riding on these waves. See? And so that's exactly how the machine is going to get its witness out. Using a gain amplifier. Not really an RF transmitter, but a gain amplifier. And what are these waves going to be? They're not RF frequency. They're low frequency waves. Because this thing's only doing like at 150 hertz or 200 hertz with all these waves in them of this witness. So I wouldn't really call it RF because it's not radio frequency. It's a high voltage, low frequency wave that's oscillating, and you can see that when you look on the scope. You can see that it's generating harmonics, you know, in a band. And the harmonics will start out like this, and we'll have a middle harmonic that the machine's running in. And with all the frequencies in here that are mixing up, it's like modulating inside there. So it's going to generate harmonic frequencies. See? And this may be at 200 hertz. And this one may be at 15K. And this one may be at 20K. And this one may be at 100K. So see, it's running in a curve. Like that. So its most power is going to be right in here
Okay.
And then the harmonics are going to be in here. But they're going to be on this wave like this, on this pulse frequency that's in between these two bands. In other words, what's going to happen is as this oscillator oscillated, chops off. So basically we're looking at, let's just do it with square waves so you understand it. And they're only going in one direction. So they're going in this direction with all the frequencies in between. But when you look at it with the spectrum analyzer, this is what you see.
All right. All right.
In other words, when you take a spectrum analyzer and you look at this, this is exactly what you see. You see that these frequencies between the witness and the oscillator circuit are generating harmonics. And so it's really a true sideband instrument. In other words, it's using the sidebands to make up all these frequencies, and that's part of what this witness is. So one of these frequencies in the witness is there. And so it keeps generating, and it keeps building. Now, John Sajecki used to say that you could take an AM radio out in the field and tune it to a station, and right where you had taken the picture, you could hold the AM radio and hear the 60-cycle hum. Well, there's a reason for that, because on the power supply itself, right, he never used a filter capacitor, so it just looked like this. It was unfiltered.
So you're saying that the Polaroid of the tree that was in the witness, if you went to where that Polaroid had been taken, where the tree was, and you had a radio, you would hear, when the machine was turned on, you would hear the hum.
You would hear a 60-cycle hum. That's what he said to me. Of course, I never bothered with that theory because I built, 4 or 5 different of these machines. And they worked. They worked for what I was doing. And I will tell you this, that they worked well for healing when they were used right. And they worked for corn. And they worked for an infestation of wasps. But you have to be very careful because you don't want your fingerprints on this.
Now, was it DDT he actually put in there?
Well, when he was treating, whatever John Sajecki was treating,
Yeah.
Depending on what insecticide that he wanted to use to kill the bugs in that field.
Yeah.
And everybody must remember, he had approval to do this.
Yeah, I know. That's what Ronnie said in his...
Yeah, he had approval. He was authorized by the FCC to generate these low-frequency waves, which are now used for submarines. They're down there. And so he had a license to do this.
Yeah.
But the problem is nobody understands exactly what the machine is.
Right.
They understand that it's a bioharmonics machine, and the reason he called it bioharmonics was because of all the harmonic structures.
Yeah.
And he was using biomaterial, so therefore you see here
BIOHA.
biocon.
Right.
See?
Yeah.
You see biocon right here. Well, let's turn on the biocon. And once we turn on the biocon, this thing's going to start oscillating and doing this. And it's going to go to wherever the witness, the picture was taken from. So.
You mentioned about not touching the witness or the picture, not having your personal imprint.
Right, you do not want to lay your fingerprint on this.
Or any of your bodily oil.
Right, because if
Yeah.
you're treating this with an insecticide,
Yeah,
your signature is on this plate.
right.
You definitely do not want to touch that. I must give you, if you build this type of device and you're using this type of device to do this, I must give you a warning about this. One of those things is these rubber gloves.
Okay.
And you want to take them out, and you preferably do not want to touch the ends. And you want to put them on and handle whatever you're handling. And you do want to wipe everything down with alcohol when you're doing this, because otherwise your imprint is going to be on this plate, even if you touch the sides
Okay.
or the bottom. You must make sure that your imprint is not on this plate at all. Otherwise, the machine's going to seek you out.
Okay, so you put your rubber gloves on, then you get an alcohol wiped cloth and you wipe. Make sure there are no things.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yes, you have to be far safer than a doctor scrubbing with this type of device because of the gains and the way it oscillates and where it runs all these frequencies in the band. All right,
So
so
this is actually a pretty dangerous.
it was a very, very dangerous machine in that. Good question, Pat, because that was the thing with the Department of Agriculture and the FCC is the government knew that this machine could be used for other things. And so they were very worried that it wouldn't be used for that. So that's the reason why he had an agricultural license and an FCC license, and he had to keep absolute detailed logs of where the machines were and what the machines were treating. A very important thing.
Yeah. I seem to remember Ronnie saying that he got worried because the farmers were turning them on each other and making.
Yes. John Sajeka got very worried, and then he discontinued the project when the farmers starting taking pictures of the other farmer and then putting it in the machine and doing strange things with the machines. This was very dangerous.
Yeah.
Because people were getting sick.
Yeah.
So rather than probably lose everything that John worked for, he just called them all in.
Right.
Got them all back except for a few. I think he didn't get a few back.
Mm-hmm.
But who was going to repair them?
Yeah.
And where were they going to find the tubes? And they didn't know what John's matching process was for the tubes. Mm-hmm. So how were they going to figure this out?
So once their shelf life hit, that was it.
Right. Once they were gone, you just couldn't take another tube and put it in here because it was tuned.
Yeah.
John spent hours and hours tuning this with a scope to make sure that the wave was right.
Yeah.
So today you can tune it pretty easy because we have spectrum analyzers. And if you get one that goes down low enough in frequency, something like a pico scope or something like that, you can tune this thing real easy. Because you can see these side bands.
Yeah.
You can actually move to each one of these and know exactly what this frequency is. And then you can change this tube and put another tube in, and then you can watch these bands move and change the fundamental frequency, right? Which is the biggest one.
Yeah.
Because this is the main master frequency. There's a main master with all this modulation inside of it that causes these side bands all the way out. And it's important that you tune it.
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't throw the machine together and expect it to work. You have to look at the tuning of the machine. to where it's oscillating with the most frequency and the most side bands out. So
the machine that you've built over there, you have tuned that.
yes, with a spectrum analyzer to match John's.
Now, I didn't hear if you mentioned this, but how many stages of amplification are there in the machine?
Well, John used 5, and I'll show you that here. So I'll go through this again. First, we have the witness plate. And our Polaroid picture has some picture on it, which in this case we'll make it a tree.
Okay.
All right? An elm tree.
Okay.
And that elm tree is sitting at your house, Pat.
Okay.
And it's infested with beetles.
Okay.
All right? So now we've taken a Polaroid picture of that. And we've got a beetle, which now is dead. Mm-hmm. And we have an insecticide. And what are we going to do?
Rubber gloves.
Right, you're not going to touch.
Right.
You're going to make sure this is totally clean. And then we're going to put the beetle.
It's a big beetle.
Well, they're big. And we're going to put a vial of the insecticide.
Okay.
All in that picture. And the first thing that we're going to do, and I'm going to leave this here so you can get a good picture of it, is we're going to build John's little amplifier here. We're going to do it with tubes. So I'm sorry if they're not if everybody's not experienced with tubes. All right, so
this is your amplifier that you built now.
well, this is exactly how it's done. And we got the first stage.
Okay.
All right, and our witness is connected to the first page. In tubes, you always remember that, you know, you got a 1 megohm resistor to ground. And say this is 30 ohms, and this is 270 k ohms. So we know that we've got a pretty high gain here, and so you would divide that into that, and that would give you the gain of the circuit. Again, I'm not going to sit here and divide it all for you to give you the gain. I'm just going to show you how that we accomplish what we're going to accomplish. Okay, so this is the first stage of the machine. Now, the second stage of the machine then is identical to this stage. So everything is staying the same, you notice this?
Yeah.
So everything operates the same. So now, let's give this a gain number.
Okay.
All right? Let's give this a gain of say, 5,000.
Okay.
So the gain is 5,000 in the first stage. And that's coupled to the next stage. And the gain of this stage is 5,000. So see what's happening here?
Now 10,000.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so then the next stage. So John had 5 stages.
Okay.
And so if we just do it this way without me drawing the whole circuit and everything, and just the grid, you can see that each one of these is 5,000, 5,000, 5,000.
So you got it 25,000.
Well, 5,000 5,000
Times 5,000.
times 5,000
Oh,
times 5,000.
Right, okay.
See, so what are you at now?
Wow.
The gain's pretty high.
Yeah.
So this machine is
Times,
operating.
not plus.
Yeah.
Times, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
it's times. See, and it keeps doing this. It keeps multiplying this. So now, basically, if you think about it for a minute, it's going to self-oscillate with that high a gain.
Yeah.
Now, here's an example, Pat. I got a speaker with an amplifier, and I got the witness, and that's a microphone. And I've set the gain on that amplifier to say be 5 level or 10 level. And I start walking towards the speaker. What's going to happen?
You're going to get distortion.
You're going to get feedback.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what's happening here. You see how it's generating this wave?
Okay.
And the last stage, I'll only draw 3, but we know there's 5.
Right.
The last stage is coupled through a capacitor to the antenna, which is right here. Now notice the length of the antenna. That's the most length that you're going to have, which is, I think this is almost 5 feet.
Yeah.
Pretty close by the time you get it already extended. About 52 inches is exactly what you want. So I'm going to put 52 inches here.
Okay.
And that's that. Now the plate is then plugged into the BIOHA. And this thing, right now, with a bare plate, is whistling. So John used to always go like this with his hand. And it would play a musical tune like all the way up. And he'd say, machine's working. He'd be playing this tune. Now you have this stuff on the plate.
Right.
You have 5,000 times 5,000 times 5,000 times 5,000 times 5,000. Now, I didn't calculate the number. I just gave you an example.
Right.
Here. Normally you divide that into that, and that would give you the game of the first stage, and second stage, and third stage,
Right.
and fourth stage. So, once again, what's happening is the gain so high, it's like I got the microphone right up to the end of the speaker, and the acoustic noise and the feedback is so bad you can't control it. So, the thing is, this isn't transmitting RF. There is no RF,
Okay.
except for maybe a very small amount.
So what's it transmitting?
I always said, since I looked at the spectrum analyzer, that infrasonic waves, something like low frequency sound waves, were coming out of this thing, because it was playing, you could hear it. You could hear it with your ears. As you went up the antenna, it would play a musical scale.
Yeah.
So once again, what's it doing? It's feeding back between this witness and the antenna. And it's going both directions.
Okay.
So where it goes out, it comes back to. Now, a little trick to keep the signal from coming back on itself. And that little trick was in this circuit here, in this ground circuit, if we just change these signs to look like that, the trick, and we connect them all together. These are all common now. If we took a battery, right, and And it has to be a dry cell battery, it has to be a carbon zinc battery. And we put that in ground, put this battery in the ground. And that shields the wave from coming back on itself. And it doesn't work right without it.
Okay.
Because then the wave can come back on itself. You see what I'm saying? So, again, I'll tell you that this thing keeps building. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you want to know something that's really important? These are low frequencies. These waves are low frequencies. But in these low frequencies are all these oscillations, Pat, with the fundamentals and all the sidebands. And that's part of this now, because it's in the loop,
Okay.
in the oscillator loop. So that's how this, all this, gets to the point of destination. I have the soil sample, I have the bug, I have the tree, and I have the chemical. And so what did I just do with the machine? I just impressed upon this machine this in terms of an oscillation. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's in terms of an oscillation, which means now it's part of the transmission that it's putting out. So what happens is this goes out through these waves and it finds this point and treats it.
So how long do you reckon it would take for the infestation to be cured?
Well, John said that once the machine reached a full saturation level, it probably took a couple of weeks to
Okay.
clear it all out. Now, he did do something that was kind of exciting because he talked about it with me. He got a job by the U.S. Agriculture Department to clean out milfoil.
Oh, that's a weed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a weed. And he was able to take this machine
Okay.
and kill all the milfoil. So they knew right then and there that it could be used for other things.
So presumably he would have had a photo of the field where the milfoil
He did,
was.
yes, he
and
had.
A little bit of the soil and the milfoil and
He had all that. And then he treated the milfoil and it was gone.
Roundup or something, yeah.
But he also did it, you know, John was into all this kind of stuff. I'm not saying that he was an absolute engineer when it came to calculating all the gains and everything.
Right.
I mean, you know, he did what worked,
Right.
you know, and he did visit other people that were working with radionics and stuff. I think Hieronymus was one, wasn't it, Tony?
Yeah. Yeah, Ronnie said they visited Hieronymus,
Yeah.
and I think other people too. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but John was not the type that would just run out and have coffee with you and then talk about this machine.
Yeah.
In other words, you had to be in private with John. You had to be totally private with
Right.
John. And I'll never forget the look on his face. When I called him up, it was 12:30 at night. And I says, John, you better get your butt over here. I want to show you something. And he says, what? I said, I just built your bioharmonics machine. And of course, John liked to kid around a lot, right? And he would say, no, you didn't, like that, you know? And I said, well, then just get your, and I said ass. But, and he came over, I said, get your ass over here. And he walked in the garage. And he looked at the scope and he just went,
Oh.
that's exactly what he did. He says, you better watch out. He said to me, he says, you better be careful. And I said, why? I said, you're the one that said I couldn't do it. And he didn't even ask the question how I got the wave shape or anything like that. Because my machine was totally different. My machine was totally different. It had filter capacitors, his didn't.
Well, how did he know that yours was working then?
Well, he could see the wave on the scope, and the
Oh,
first thing he
okay.
did was he went to the antenna and he went
Okay.
like that, and he goes, you better be careful.
Yeah.
And I certainly found out that you better be careful
Yeah.
because I thought that it was a simple procedure to take the yellow jacket infestation and just spray them with spray on the plate. Well, I had been touching the plate.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you something, you can get real sick.
Yeah.
And so I'm warning everybody that if you attempt this radionics or whatever you want to call it, psychotronics, radionics, biharmonics, you better watch out.
Yeah.
You know, now, the other thing about this is this can be used for good too.
Uh-huh.
This can be used with vitamins. It can be used with people, you know, as a witness, providing that you don't want to do any harm with anything like this. You only want to do good with it. You know, you don't think you're just going to take something and get even with somebody, because it doesn't really work that way.
Right.
You know, there's a danger to doing this. And one of the dangers is if you forget one little thing that I've said, it will come back on you.
Yeah.
And it'll be devastating when it comes back on you.
Yeah.
And this is probably why John had to have the agriculture license and the FCC license, is because there's really no radio transmission here, Pat. This is not an RF
Right.
type oscillator, you know, that's like crystal controlled where you have a radio frequency that's constant. No, this isn't doing that. This is generating this musical wave, which he called a musical wave,
Right.
in cycles. In other words, it's generating that wave in cycles. And those cycles is what he said. Now, I never did it, so I'm going to be totally honest with everybody here. I never went to where I was doing the treatment with an AM radio to find out if this wave was there. But I believe what he said, because John proved a few things to me with these machines, and I proved a few things to him. I really can't go in that, but
Presumably that's one reason why the Ministry of Agriculture really
yes.
didn't think it was a good idea in the end.
Well, no, because
They didn't withdraw that permission, though.
no, they didn't take
Okay.
anything away from John.
Okay.
You know, John stopped this on his own,
Okay.
but he always kept a special machine,
Yeah.
because he would every once in a while come to my shop with it was in a smaller case than this. And he would come to my shop and he would say, could I use your oscilloscope? And he would pull up the antenna, all right, and he would plug it in and he'd turn it on, and he'd wait a few minutes, he'd turn this on, and then he'd take the scope with a loop around it, right? He'd put a loop of wire around this and take the scope, and there you'd see the wave on the scope.
Okay.
He'd say, it's working fine. And then he'd put the antenna down, just like this. Shut the machine off and look at me and go, see you tonight for coffee. And he'd be gone. You know. He actually was, he was not a bad guy. In other words, he was not bad to me.
Okay.
You know, and we had a lot to talk about at night, and we used to talk about all this and other machines that he had seen and done and things like that. So he was quite knowledgeable when it came to cycles, you know.
Yeah.
And he based everything on these cycles that was going on throughout history. So he was into that pretty well. But something here in all this machinery stopped John Sajeka from doing this any longer.
Right.
And I don't know what that was. And I never asked him.
Yeah.
I just know that he kept the machine till the day he died. And then mysteriously when he died,
Yeah.
who knows where the machines went. We do know Ronnie got some, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. How many?
But where are the rest?
yeah.
See, that's the real question.
Yeah.
And what I find very surprising is how long did his schoolhouse stand, Tony?
It had been there for 50 years or so. Yeah.
And then one day out
And
of the
it was built
blue,
out of solid brick, too.
yeah,
Yeah.
Jake, tell us about. Well, this was originally a schoolhouse
Yep.
for the area, wasn't it?
It was built in 1916, but I think when I went to school here, there were 54 students. That was the total amount of students in the class. But it had, during its history, they had a senior high. It was kindergarten through 12th grade. So it just outlasted the population. The population grew up and got bigger, and they didn't need the school any longer. So our family purchased it just to maintain the school for a while, which he did. I put equipment in there, and so did Johnny, and there are records of the old companies here yet.
So after John Sajeka died, what was left in California was stored here, and now you removed the.
Well, whatever I could get. I brought a U-Haul from California back here.
one day out of the blue, Ronnie was gone.
Just within the last 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
Ronnie was gone.
Yeah.
And a tornado came out of nowhere and destroyed the schoolhouse.
Yeah.
Now, why?
Yeah.
Which just stood in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, what was actually buried at that schoolhouse or in that schoolhouse that nobody knew about? And it just picked, right, Tony? It just picked the one building.
Yeah.
And where? Where, Iowa?
Yeah, where Iowa? What's there? Nothing.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's what I wanted to tell everybody. You know, I basically wanted to give them an explanation of how the machine operated and what it looked like and what could be rebuilt when it looks like this, and how it oscillates. And if you'll give me a few seconds here, I'll bring out a plate and show it to you.
I have a question. Back in, I think, in the 50s,
Right.
there was some engineers or scientists, I think they went to Stanford.
Yeah, you cackle.
They invented a machine kind of like this. What's the relationship? And I think in the Sajeka files, there's a circuit diagram for the Yukaku machine, which is what it was called.
Right.
In the Sajeka files, is this related to the Yukaku machine?
Oh, yeah. The Yukaku, actually very, very, very simple compared to John Sajeka's machine. John's machine has 5 stages in it, you know, and a super gain. And each one of John's stages is tuned to a specific biological form that he was dealing with. You know, so it encompasses 5 stages, all giving different frequencies and causing these. Let me go through this one more time for everybody. So first let's put the diagram of the Yukako machine so you can see the similarity.
Okay.
All right, so once again we have our tube. And basically this tube, the way it's hooked up, is actually an RF amplifier tube, but the way it's hooked up with its, you know, grid to its cathode makes it no different than an audio tube. Because a 6L6 is basically would be the same tube without the gain. All right? So diagram wise, to me the tube is, the way that it's hooked up, it's no more than an amplifier tube. So once again, this would be the Yukako. Witness is on the plate. And this stage then would be coupled to the next stage, like this. Same arrangement. Okay. And basically this is the circuit, minus the values. So I could actually put values in here, but it's in the SAJACA files. You know, I've already given this information one time in the files that we released, Tony. But this is basically the Yukako. And it was a very simple machine, and these two guys are the first ones to do the experiments with this machine. Now everything that I researched, because I did ask John SAJACA about that one time, I said, well, it's this machine here. He says, no, it's not. My machine is totally different. I said, yeah, but I got the same wave shape as you got. He says, well, you're lucky. You know, you're lucky. You're a little bit smarter than the rest of them. You know, but John probably didn't balance. He probably put a tube in and said, okay, I like that. And he kept playing with these values until he got everything the way he wanted it. But basically, the Yukako, if we have once again, if we have this fundamental frequency that's being modulated inside, like this, okay? And then these frequencies create this band, and then this, the next frequency creates this band, and this band, it keeps going like this, all the way out.
So they reduce?
Well, these are side bands.
Okay.
Of the frequencies. In other words, we're hitting certain frequencies by how many frequencies we modulate here. All right, but it's clipped. It's not. It's so that it causes these side bands.
I was wondering why they didn't go so high. They kept getting...
No, they keep getting smaller because...
They decay.
Yeah, well, they're higher, you know, the frequencies are different.
Okay.
They're lower on one side and higher on the other
So you
side.
limit the gain on the primary frequency, which forces the harmonics.
Well, you force this one to do an oscillation with many frequencies in it.
Okay.
And then it creates these side bands.
Okay.
You know, it sort of works like ham radio, in a way, but audio.
Okay.
And so all these frequencies end up being in here at different frequency rates. So let's say this is 500, and this one's 350, and this one, now watch what's happening, 150, and this one, I'm going down. Okay, and this is 50, and this is 10,
50,
right?
50 what?
50 cycles, see?
Okay.
50 hertz,
Yeah.
see?
Yeah.
And then this one's going from 500 to 1,000, right? And this is, 2,000,
Okay.
see? 4,000, 5,000,
Yeah.
and 10,000, right?
Yeah.
Be way out here. 20th harmonic or whatever you want to, because it's the harmonics out.
Right.
So now, in the master wave, and that's the reason for no filtering in these machines,
Okay.
because it rides the 60 cycle wave.
Okay.
In other words, it's a low frequency transmitter.
As was the other one.
And that's why John Sajeka would say, I went to the area with an AM radio and I could hear the buzz. Because it's out there. It's out there at that area.
So, but this is the Yukaku machine, right?
Yeah, but they work fundamentally the
Oh,
same.
okay.
Sajeka wanted 5 stages because he wanted more bands in here. He wanted to cover everything.
Okay.
And he worked on that and worked on that and worked on that and worked on that until he got the perfect match and the perfect wave that he wanted, which was something like a feather. So it basically looks like this. Right? And then you can see in here that this is, the 60 hertz
Okay.
right here, and everything is riding in here. So I wouldn't really call it an RF transmitter. I'd call it like a subharmonic or ultrasonic transmitter. Where it's working on the biological system, because you got to take this into consideration. We're biological. And the Earth is at a certain frequency, and it goes high up in one, depending on where it is. In other words, you go to sleep at this one, you wake up at this one, you get excited, and there's this frequency that your brain's doing. So John's working on a biological type cycles, and he termed everything in cycles. So you have to think to yourself for a minute. Okay, what was he doing? Right. Well, he wanted to work on that biological system, say the milfoil, and so he needed the frequency range in this lower range that would hit that.
Yeah.
And then it would work on it, because that would be what would be on the witness.